Welcome to ABA on Tap. I'm Mike Rubio with Dan Lowry. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and always analyze responsibly. Hey, this is your ever grateful co-host, Mike Rubio, and this is part 3 with Dr. Scott O'Donnell. What a guy. Enjoy.
That could be freedom too. And because sometimes, to get to freedom, there has to be some pain and suffering. That's what it takes to be free.
That is,
but for me,
so you made me think of models of addiction. So say for heroin addicts who are free to do what they do to a certain extent. And then there's a certain freedom to feel that comes back that is very uncomfortable in terms of now itching behavior, right? So your pain receptors are coming back to life. And now that same freedom that you felt to sort of numb yourself, you have a newfound freedom, which is actually to now have to be able to feel pain and suffering, but that doesn't feel that way in that moment. It's just, it really, I don't know, twist my head around a little bit, but you made me think of that in that moment where, yeah, pain and suffering, the idea of enduring a workout, there's a certain level of stress that you're willingly applying to yourself in that moment, that if you don't have a sense of enjoyment for it, then it changes your whole perspective of how free you feel in that moment, or the idea that you're running or working out for the eustress sense of it, as opposed to being feeling constraints of fitness or health, which in and of themselves provide a certain freedom if you can achieve them. So I just feel like it's a matter of perspective, not to boil it down too far, but it's so interchangeable in a sense, and based on any given context at any given time. And then, maybe going back to the best thing I can think of is going back to that initial sense of excitation or arousal that you might be feeling physiologically, and how that provides an underlying foundation to how you're going to perceive those things. So he was talking about pain and suffering and how that might, there's a certain aspect of freedom to that. The idea that you have a right, if you will, to feel pain, right? So I talked about addiction. Yeah. Anyway,
that's why I went to the bathroom right now. I exercised my free will to choose to go to the bathroom.
Very reinforcing. Very reinforcing.
Very reinforcing.
I talk about that with toilet training with parents too, in terms of trying to gauge musculature and bladder size by how wet child's diaper might be in the morning, and the idea that you might catch them and then they're dry. That's the best time to go sit them down. If do those pieces, the idea that, and I tell parents too, you're in the car and you're stuck in traffic and you got to pee, and then you get home, and that feeling of when you finally get home, it's just like, it's okay to have your child realize that and pair it along with that, white porcelain throne and that feeling of, and it's no wonder that what do most of us do first thing when you wake up, you've been holding it all night, right? And of course, if you're over 50 like me, you've probably done it several times during the night, but we won't get into that.
Oh man, my migraine meds every morning. I woke up at 5 every morning. But yeah, so it made me think about it when I was exercising my free will, that people could look at that as free will, but it also comes down to the consequences, right? Because like I really wanted to be part of this conversation, and that was very reinforcing to me. At some point, it was like the consequence of, or the amount of reinforcement I was getting from this conversation was no longer greater than the amount of reinforcement that I perceived going to the bathroom would give me. So I exercised my free will. You can't necessarily get inside my head and figure out at what exact point those consequences are going to change. And I know we can affect them with, satiation or deprivation, or establishing operations and abolishing operations, so we can make a consequence more likely, but we can never fully know what consequence. Well, not we can never, but most of the times we cannot know what consequence someone's going to choose. This leads me to kind of that, whether we want to call that free will or variability in behavior. Yeah, I don't know.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I did not name Israel Gold Diamond in this, because Gold Diamond had a lot to say about free will. He saw it as choice, as that freedom is having like basically freedom is having alternative reinforcement during extinction conditions,
Alternative.
right? So like that you have somewhere else to turn to. And Catania thought about this too, and Catania actually did some studies. I don't know if you like knew that Catania did some studies on freedom, and he looked at choice, and he found that pigeons prefer choice, and he demonstrated this experimentally. And it might be adaptive if you think about it. If one avenue of reinforcement were to cease, it would be adapted to have an alternative, source of reinforcement. Not ideal, but adaptive just to have, another source of reinforcement. And then he found that when he was doing his experiment, which was like a concurrent chains arrangement, that he was able to like predict and account for the pigeon's choices, and it was like the one chain allowed them to have a choice between like two, but it was just equaled out, so the reinforcement was enough. But even when they got to the point where they got like a forced choice, like where it was more rewarding for the forced choice, right? The birds would do that for a little bit, but they would still revert back to having that preference. Once the contingencies of reinforcement are the same, they go back to having a preference for having a choice.
That makes sense. I mean,
And
freedom seems like you're saying, right? So it means that you have two options of consequences that
more
are
options, yeah.
reinforcing. If one's reinforcing and one's aversive, then I think somebody might argue that's not freedom anymore. I don't know, but it
Yeah,
seems like that's exactly what
yeah,
you're saying.
yeah. Catania argued that he argued like an organism without the opportunity to choose among other alternatives, or they're not called free, right? So he kind of like took Skinner looked at the contingencies of reinforcement. Catania looked at like, oh, like would this organism be called free? Israel go down and look at choices. Sidman wrote about it too, and he talked about coercion, and then he saw like that is like not freedom because it's controlled behavior through aversive means. So there's a lot of different people have spoken on it, and it's funny, like where are we at now? Where are we at as behavior analysts in this year, in this 250th anniversary of a country? When there's going to be all these events going on, and everybody's going to be talking about freedom, and it's going
Yeah.
to be the summer soon. And this episode is going to come out probably closer to the summer, I imagine,
Well,
and things are going to be
no,
ramping
but
up,
we'll
or
talk about
maybe
that.
maybe in the spring.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. It'll come out soon,
But
very soon.
yeah, but for me, freedom is behavioral. And like
Yeah.
in the long run, it's what we do, it's what we don't do, and it's what we do too much of. And what it looks like when I'm making freedom the most important thing for me is I'm being a leader in my community, and I'm guiding my community with behavior analysis to give them more control. I'm giving people more options where, if they haven't had more options, I'm trying to find one for them. And I'm freeing people from environmental control that's made their lives miserable and has made them miserable, and showing them that control by the environment that leads to happiness is possible, and it's a road they can take.
And that's so interesting too, because we are talking about environments, and then you're dealing with the individual within that environment, and ultimately sort of telling them it behooves them to make some change within or in their actions in order to impact their environment in a way that then returns a little bit more of that freedom. So it is, I think you're capturing it nicely. It's there's a reciprocity to it with your environment. There's a sense of how your change in behavior then allows for your environment to perceive you differently in a sense in terms of other organisms. There's a lot to be explored there. You were talking about the 250th anniversary. We're going to be talking about freedom. And then with that, we alluded to this a little bit. I want to throw this out there without getting too in depth, but there's a lot of stuff going on right now, a lot of events going on right now that really put our freedom in question. So
I
freedom
know.
to peacefully assemble, for example, and then there's rights that come with that. So I don't know if you guys, gentlemen, have any thoughts on that. I think that our work maybe in the near future is going to be very important sociopolitically. So the idea that what is your behavior if you encounter certain law enforcement authorities these days, I think there's a lot to be explored
Hmm.
there in terms of then our right to peacefully assemble, knowing that that's all being interpreted through a different lens right now. And it's not to say that I
Hmm.
take one side or the other. I think that I can look at the notion of peaceful assembly right now and go, they shouldn't have done that.
Mhm.
That's really easily going to attract a certain reaction from this other side here. And then there's certainly plenty of examples where I look at authority and I go, oh, wow, our freedom's at stake here. This is really being limited. So I'll throw that out there for anybody who wants to comment.
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. I actually I've seen that in multiple situations. I remember probably about 15, no, maybe a little less than that, maybe about a dozen years ago. I was working with adults with autism, and they came out with this like ruling that we couldn't be all at the same place at the same time. We couldn't like all take over a movie theater or something like that. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what about their rights to assemble, peacefully assemble?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then the one last person I want to mention on who's written on freedom was Goltz. I think it was Sandra Goltz, and she wrote a few years ago, 2020. She wrote about that freedom is not having diverted resources. I think her example was if you were using a river for water and someone upstream diverted that river, then you would not be free. You would be like, under their reversing control. And there's also that going around too, where we have institutional racism and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And even what I'm doing with like SIBA, with expanding these avenues for behavior analysts to work outside of autism, I feel like that is a step towards freedom. That it's a step towards giving behavior analysts more options where they might feel like my only option for work is to work with kids with autism, when it's like a science of behavior that could help everyone. And if we're able to, increase their choices and, give them, some autonomy where they can at least have some choices, whether their choices are determined by the environment or not, at least have, some more options so they don't feel stuck, and make sure that like resources aren't being diverted from us, from other, avenues or other practitioners and stuff like that, then we are taking a step towards making behavior analysts more free.
I do like that, and certainly appreciate that you've done this before for us on the show, looked at other avenues, and I think that was our theme for last season is trying to find those guests. And interestingly enough, we all sort of came to prominence, if you will, through the same routes, which is now applying it in a
Yeah.
way that was relevant socially in terms of autism treatment. So everybody's got some history with that path, which is what's been interesting for us in saying we all started here, and then now a lot of people are doing something different, a different application of behavior analysis, which is very, very invigorating and enjoyable for us to hear about and to discuss with somebody like you about.
Yeah,
I think,
it's been cool.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I think to what you
No,
were
it's your
saying.
show's been cool. Like just hearing everybody from like you're right, hearing everybody from these different disciplines. Sorry, Dan. Please continue.
No.
I just want to compliment you on that.
Well, thank you for your time, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you for
no,
that.
thank you so much. And that's why you are one of the people that, like, when we reschedule, we're like a couple people we have to get back on regularly. And you are certainly at the top of that list.
I
Just
appreciate
reflecting
that.
on what you were saying, Mike, the freedom piece, I think one time it's probably tested a lot from people from various different cultures. So I can just speak from my own, was like the COVID vaccine. I felt people feel like that was one of the
Mm-hmm.
first kind of, not first, but one of the most recent, maybe biggest, where people felt like their freedom was
Yeah,
being infringed on. And it
yeah,
maybe goes
mandate.
back to
Yeah,
that where you've got two consequences and they don't feel like both are reinforcing. There's a reinforcing and an aversive consequence. And
yeah, like
uh
voting for president. Yeah,
yep,
like
voting for president.
both these options suck.
Yep.
Like
Well, that actually was going to be my question, or another one, like with the current situation on the media, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of the media, which might be posting negative things, is now going to have funding withdrawn from them, so they probably feel like their
Mm-hmm.
freedom is being infringed on because, again, they've got one reinforcing thing for them if they want funding, and then one aversive situation. So my question to you is, it seems like if we have two reinforcing options or multiple reinforcing options, then there's the level of freedom. If we have a reinforcing option and probably an aversive option, then freedom doesn't seem there. What if there are two aversive options? Do we now have freedom to choose the less aversive option, or is that no longer freedom because we're dealing with aversives?
or what if I give you too many options and you have a hard time choosing?
Is that yeah,
Like, or what
yeah.
if I structure the options in a way that makes you choose one option over another? Like, like I'm giving you what I want you to do, and I'm also giving you another worse option and another worse option than that. So you're most likely choosing what I want you to do. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can go there. From what I've seen in the choice literature, when people are faced with too many options, right, then they have a hard time choosing. So if you can imagine a buffet that has a lot of different preferred items, and just having too many, for the most part, the it is more reinforcing to have options, but that array of options is just as reinforcing as that most preferred item or in the array. And then if you're giving people an option of like, they have terrible choices, then it's still as reinforcing as the most preferred item in the array. So yeah, it's not the most reinforcing situation, and you might not have people even choose, which you see that a lot of times with voting. People don't vote, and
Mm.
some people get mad at people who don't vote. I didn't vote for president in an election, and a friend of mine, because I didn't like either candidate. And this usually happens. I'm like, I don't like this candidate. I don't like that candidate. Like, why would I vote for someone I don't like? I'm not going to vote for the other person just because I don't like that person more,
Mm.
you know? But yeah, so yeah, when you have like that situation, it's like that's not even to choose there is not as even as reinforcing. They'll still make a choice, but it's not like it's not rewarding.
And then somebody might say just the civil liberty of being able to vote is their reinforcement, but that doesn't diminish what you just said in terms of, well, no, you're still choosing between the lesser of two evils. Where's the liberty in that sense? So there's certainly a lot of ways to slice this.
Do you do that with, and I was thinking about it like in the therapy context, right? So you may have somebody that's severely depressed or something like that, and everything might seem, and please, I'm pretty ignorant to this, so correct me if I'm wrong with how I'm characterizing this, but this is just hypothetical. Maybe all of the behavioral alternatives seem aversive to them, right? Maybe,
Would
well,
not
I
be.
guess maybe it seems more reinforcing, but I don't want to stay at home, but I don't want to go out because then I'm gonna, interact with people. So potentially everything either seems aversive or is framed within an aversive context. So are you then
Mhm.
guiding them to kind of choose the less aversive? Because
Hmm.
that almost seems kind of like the analogous to
Yeah,
the candidacy piece.
and I would say that would be more typical of like diagnosis where you're avoidant, and depression is almost like more of an extinction scenario that like, well, I'm not feeling the same way about doing the things I used to do. I like it doesn't feel good doing it anymore. And so why should I do that? And for the most part, the way you get someone out of depression is you get them doing those things again. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter if you like doing it this time. This is something you used to like doing, so you should continue to do it.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when people reconnect with that, then they'll continue to do it. So you could tell it's reinforcing, and now it's rewarding again
Okay.
because you see them continue. And I think that's, yeah, people can absolutely get stuck. They'll get stuck at home and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, I can't remember what Skinner called it, like in a bolus or something like that. It's a point where an animal during extinction, just pretty much stops responding, and you're looking for that next response, right? And then you're not getting it at all because there's nothing
Yeah,
there. There's nothing there really to reinforce. So you go for a long period of time when you're ready to reinforce, and you're waiting for the animal, but the animal's not
Okay.
really
yeah,
doing
that's the
anything.
helplessness model too, right? Which I think does get applied to depression pretty commonly in terms of,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah,
if I
yeah.
go here, I get shocked. If I go here, I get shocked. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna stand
Or
still.
what
Yeah,
about
I'm just
like
gonna stay here.
you get a
Yeah.
speeding ticket and you can pay $500 to do 50 hours of community service? Is that freedom? The ability to differentiate between two aversives?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. I would still say that's freedom, because like that is, it's still reinforcing to choose the less aversive alternative. There was something my mentor actually did research on, that you can't, and thank God they did this research. You can't do this research anymore. You can't shock animals as much as you can anymore. But it certainly showed that like it is rewarding to go to a less aversive situation.
Sure,
So if
sure.
you go from hell to purgatory, then you're going to feel better about yourself.
Well, I feel, and I agree. I think that is a dangerous slope because I think sometimes the way that clinical ABA, like in the home, has been we're going to be the people that, and again, I think it's changed over time as we become more assent based and aware of things. But I can remember a lot of times it was like we're going to be the aversive that comes in and tells you to do a bunch of stuff, and then when you do all the stuff we ask you to do, then you can have a break away from us. So it was like the choice between
And
kind of navigating two aversives, and we could say, well, oh look, it's reinforcing to be away from us,
Mm.
which I think is how a lot of like the original, and I wouldn't even say ABA because I think that's maybe doing ABA a disservice. I'll say,
autism.
yeah, autism treatment. Why am I so you've got the conceptual
Service, service
uh
delivery.
BSD, behavioral service delivery. Thank you.
Yeah.
That may have been kind of like what you were saying, like the weighing of two aversives and then attributing reinforcement to the less aversive.
Mm. Yeah, you made me think about something because I was remember I was doing discrete trial with a client. And I know we talked about doing discrete trial before, and this client, like, if you make it really rewarding for them,
Yeah.
they'll like to, yeah, they'll really like it. And then I'm telling them to take a break, and they're just kind of like hanging out there because I know what it's like. Yeah, like, it's like, oh, this is really rewarding. All right, go ahead, take a break. Well, now the break isn't rewarding because they'd rather be sitting at the table and getting all this reinforcement than instead of taking a break and not all of a sudden. So you get that situation too, and the client just kind of like hangs right near you, and it's like, no, 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 go take a break and play with toys, and they're like, no, I want to stay here, or they don't say anything, they just stay there.
And
But I've seen that too.
yeah, the idea of break too, in that sense, right? So the notion that the child might, yeah, I've seen this with staff. Well, you're taking a break from this idea of a demand you were placing on them, and they actually
Hmm.
want to play with you with that toy, but you think it's break time. So we're
Yeah, right.
missing an opportunity to, to pair, to build rapport, to provide other layers of reinforcement there. It's again, it's always a constant It's a constant. I like to refer to the dance. You're kind of dancing, and sometimes you can speed up, and sometimes you can slow down, and but you always have to be looking at that notion of some active effort, even if it's an active effort to really provide that negative reinforcement. I'm completely off your back right now because I feel like I did push you too hard, and maybe you were vocalizing that, and now I'm going to get off, your back, and it doesn't necessarily change the possibility that during that break time, that client might still want to engage in something that isn't directed by me, but now directed by them.
I have a question
Mm.
for you, Scott, kind of regarding this. I didn't know this is where this conversation was going to go, but it's certainly a fun and interesting one to think about because the initial thought I have with freedom is it's interesting, right? Because there has to be some bounds to it because, right, like I could be like, well, freedom is me being able to go just take anything that I want from somebody. That's freedom. I can go just take something, but Amazon would be like, no, you have to pay a certain amount of money to purchase this item. You can't just go take whatever you want. So now there's barriers on my freedom with any context. So that's kind of the first thought. So I do have two choices, but unabated freedom. So there's still going to be some confines with that. And then the second part of my question with that is going back to the philosophical assumptions that we talked about and kind of like perception versus realism. Like the idea of I feel like we have the right to peacefully assemble or freedom of speech or whatever. And I feel that I have that freedom, but I actually might not, right? I might peacefully assemble of which I thought was free and still get arrested for it, so I wasn't free. So
Hmm.
kind of the realism versus the perception. And I don't know if you can ever know what the realism is. You can only live throughout your perception or what you perceive as freedom until you test it and then it gets proven free or not free. So I don't know.
Hmm.
Those are just two thoughts I had. I wanted to kind of run those by you and get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. If you go with the feeling of freedom as an indicator, this is my thought on it, which I feel like feelings aren't good indicators. Tells us
Okay.
something about what's going on around us, but shouldn't we shouldn't trust it all the way because of habituation. Doesn't really tell us a magnitude, of what's going on us. But if you go with a feeling of freedom, then Skinner feels like if you arrange the contingencies right, you will get this feeling of freedom. And he always felt it was like an escape from aversive. You get away from the aversive and you feel better escaping from the aversive. But it could also be like winning encounter control. Like, all right, well, like I got to choose tonight. Like you might be arguing where we're going to eat tonight. All right, like she chose this, I choose, and then you can feel like, oh, good, we're going there, and I don't have to go to that place that she wants to go to because I don't like that place, and then I'll be like miserable for like a while for the hour and a half that I'm there, like eating or whatever.
Dan's
So
choice is
I
always
think about,
wrong anyway.
That's
So
true.
whatever Dan
oh yeah,
chooses in real life is
yeah.
wrong. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you add some people to your family, you don't get to choose at all, Dan. You don't even get to say if once you have kids and the kids start to decide, I don't get to listen to. I don't even get to listen to my music in the car anymore. So we're talking about freedom here, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's great, and the kids and the kid. I don't know. I feel
That's
like the
because you're
kids might
listening
have
to
taken
the
away my.
ABA on Tap podcast. That's why you're not listening to music in the car.
Are you kidding? Do you think my kids would let me listen to ABA on top in the
No.
car? As soon as they get in the car, they like my daughter plugs in her phone, and then it's all Taylor Swift. After that.
Taylor
So,
Swift. Not too
oh
bad.
yeah.
I have to endure that here and there, and I've learned to enjoy it. Right now with my 5-year-old, it's all
Mm.
K-pop Demon Hunters
Oh,
soundtrack.
K-pop Demon Hunters. Oh
Yeah,
wow.
so it's all K-pop stuff, and I got to tell you, it's grown on me. I'm not gonna lie, it's grown on me. Now I'm humming the songs
Yeah,
all day. It's all right. Yeah.
I do like the girls' world. It was different from me growing up, but there's certainly a different perspective. It's all, softball, not baseball. It's, cheerleading, not whatever we would do. So yeah, pretty. It's different. It's different. It's pretty fun,
So
and I know all the princesses. I know all the Disney princesses.
they're all around us right now. That you mentioned cheerleading. I wanted to circle back to that, just in terms of the rigor and the intensity of that in getting and developing that skill. It's interesting to consider the reinforcement systems because a lot of that's really hard to get to,
hmm
and it's painful, and it's rigorous, and then I don't know, there's some prospective delivery of reinforcement that maybe drives your daughter. I don't know, you have any insight on that? I mean, you probably see her do things that you would never attempt,
Oh
or
yeah, yeah. They
especially
they
now.
lift girls up, lift them above their heads, and they spin them around, and then like and this girl. I mean, really, like these girls are like like my daughter's 5 foot something, so these girls are like over 5 foot off the ground, and they're standing in the air, and then they're being spun around and things like that. It was really interesting seeing her. So she's been cheerleading for a while, and she started high school and she tried out for high school and made it. And they really like her as a cheerleader there too. They keep on saying, "Oh, you're going to be awesome when you're a senior." The amount of work it is like extreme. I have not used behavior analysis there much. I think if I would, I'd probably be looking at like the mastery approaches, influencing approaches.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, and like
A lot
where
of
they fit and what
repetition.
you can do. But you're talking about like almost 20 girls doing synchronized moves and stuff like that. They don't throw them up in the air, but they do lift them up. And it's dangerous. Girls can fall and stuff like
Yeah,
that. My daughter has like scratches all over her wrist just from like putting another girl up and like something swinging around and
yeah.
hitting her wrist and stuff like that. So certainly a lot of work, and they compete, right? So they do competitions. This isn't like sideline cheer. If you think this isn't like
Oh,
they're
wow.
a sideline at a football game. This is like they skip that. Like that's not important. That's the littlest part. That's like has nothing to do with what we want to do. We want to compete against the other cheerleaders and
Yeah.
like to see who's better. Their program was like nowhere last year, and they got a new coach, and she really turned the team around. They got fourth in the state and had never placed in the states before, so which is great, and they feel like they have a chance in Disney World. But let me tell you something. If we're talking about situations where you don't feel free, like I have no idea what my schedule is coming up at the end of next week because I'll be in Disney World. I don't know if I'll be able to
Awesome.
go to the parks or even see Mickey Mouse at all. I might be driving her around from one practice to another practice and one event to another event. And even on the weekends now, like I am glad to go to work on Monday because weekends are so busy. Work is a lot less work than the weekends, right? So like when I go back to work, I'm like, oh,
That's funny.
thank goodness I'm here. I just need a break. I need work to be my break from like from the weekends because lots of running around. But I love it. I'm just in super dad mode right now. I
That's
do love
awesome.
it, and yeah, it's fun. It puts a big like that smile that you have on your face, Mike. That right now,
I mean,
that's what it does to you.
we've
It
been
puts that
talking
smile
about,
on your
right? Like
face.
it doesn't sound like your schedule's very free, but I'm sure you feel very free in your role as a father, and that's exactly what you want to
Yeah.
be doing. And even if it's not, the idea of driving around from practice to practice instead of enjoying the parks at Disney World may not sound very free, but you're doing exactly what you want to do. And yeah,
Exactly.
there's nothing harder and yet more rewarding, I think, than I'm going to say fatherhood. I don't know what it is to be a mom. I would say
Hmm.
parenting in general. But yeah, I appreciate that you noticed the smile on my face. It's an incredible drive. It's an incredible motivating
It
opportunity
is.
to.
It's like this motivated. Like all of a sudden, you're just willing to do anything for them. It's like a switch that turns. Wait, you wait, Dan. Well, you're enjoying your bachelorhood, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you
I've
you
been
know
with
it.
my domestic partner for like 14 years, so my
Oh,
bachelorhood's a
okay.
long time a long time ago. But yeah, I don't think we're gonna have kids. It's nice to hand them back, or it's not. They're really cute. Like Mike's 5-year-old is adorable, and it's nice to just be able to leave if I want. Talk about
I know some people.
instructional control. Like we talk
Right.
about trying to teach parents how to do it. If we could do instructional control like 40% as well as kids do it to parents, oh, we'd be great.
Yeah.
Nothing gives me a greater sense of empathy and compassion during our my professional work than being a parent, and especially now with my 5-year-old. Dan, you kind of joke that I had her just so that I could work up my chops again. That's not necessarily true, but it's interesting because this whole progression over the past 5 years, she has literally been my driving force. And I'll come home and just think about my favorite phrase is saying I can preach this ABA stuff all day and parent education, and then I have to go do it. And nothing gives me a greater sense of empathy or compassion for the clients I work with, and really understanding that I don't want to, with all due respect to all parties involved, my child's neurotypical, and you wouldn't expect. I don't have to run around with to do all these therapies with him and all these things that would seem like constraints, and yet parenting and doing it well and being present and being there all as much as I can. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and you hope that you can derive some level of reinforcement and enjoyment, and I certainly do. It's incredible.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
have
It's like a never-ending bucket. It's
It
like a
is.
never-ending bucket.
It really is. I mean, it gives you a sense of purpose. I sometimes wonder
Yeah.
this is really those three organisms are really the main reason why I tolerate the world on most days. Just like,
Yeah.
I
Right.
don't even actively think about them. It's just like, I've got a reason to be here, and I'm pretty sure they like having me around. And for that reason, I'm going to stick around.
Yeah.
no, you
Hmm.
definitely have a joy and a passion when you're with your kids. It's amazing. I have one more question. If you
Yeah.
have a few minutes, or do you have a hard cut?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
So I was thinking about your top down versus bottom up kind of
Mm.
premise. And I want to relate that to, without picking a side, I remember it was like 2 weeks ago or whatever, where that lady, Renee Wood or whatever, got shot
Mm.
in Minnesota, got killed. And I remember when that happened, I had a bunch of migraines, so I've tried to stay off social media, but that week I was just like in bed and I had nothing to do, so I was scrolling social media. And when that happened, I mean, the footage was the footage. And again, I don't know how many of these people are real or not or whatever, but literally like half of the Facebook feed was like, the officer was to the side. He had no business shooting her. And the other half was like, the officer was like in front. She was about to run him over. He was justified. So the footage was the footage, but you have people that watch
Yeah.
the same exact footage coming up with two different conclusions. So my question to you is kind of behaviorally, like your thoughts on that. Is it people have like a preconceived notion and then it literally changes their perception? Are they ignoring their perception and their thoughts and just kind of going from there? What are your thoughts on that phenomenon? How the footage can be the same and you got people watching it coming up with two totally different conclusions.
Well, I do have a couple of thoughts on that. And one
Please.
one thought I have on it is this word, and this is something that we can actually measure. We usually measure this in the generalized matching equation, bias. And bias is a disproportionate weight for or against a thing. and it's behavior allocated to one response regardless of reinforcement contingencies, right? And it might be like an idiosyncratic preference, like I favor my right hand. I'm just going to use my right hand more. But it could be about knowledge. If you think about it, knowledge biases us, and we are biased against things we don't know. How could we be biased for something we don't know, about? And then, ignorance also, so we're like biased. I guess we're biased towards the knowledge and against what is not known, what we don't know. And being unbiased is like being what, free from influence, right? So it comes
Okay.
back to that kind of word, like that, we bring freedom, like freedom, bias is like unbiased is free from influence. One of the things in ACT, and I think about this often, and I know you guys talked about the hexaflex briefly with Matt, I think Matt Tapia. And I was surprised that you never heard of the hexaflex before, because I was like, wow, the hexaflex is like one of the main things, but it's like a little 6-pointed map to talk about the processes. And the top process is, or usually at the top, it's mindfulness, is present moment responding. And there's there's a definition for it, and like a 2-point definition, and it's responding to, basically, I'm going to explain it like a behavior analyst. Responding to present moment sensory input, non-judgmentally. So basically without bias. And my clients sometimes they kind of know how to do that, like respond to it as if you've never experienced before. And we do this exercise called the candy exercise, where people take a piece of candy and they're eating it and they put it in their mouths and stuff like that. And a lot of times people have a hard time with the candy first. They're like, oh, I've seen this candy before. I've had it before. I didn't like it when I was a kid. And it's like, no, we need to approach this without bias. Like, what can you tell me about the candy that has nothing to do with your experience with the candy? And then they start talking about like, oh, the wrapper is red and it has these little yellow things on it. And they start describing it like, with their senses instead
Is
of
that possible
with
though,
like,
Scott? Is it possible to approach something without bias? I mean,
I,
you can
I
try to,
wonder
but
because,
can you get past
yeah,
that?
I wonder because even I'm asking them to do it. So
Yes.
like, here's the environment controlling behavior. So like, you're really approaching it without bias? But I think in a relational frame theory sense, that like people kind of know a way that it is that they can act that way or act against it or act similar or act, so it kind of makes it a thing, you know, that way. But I always question that. Can you really be truly unbiased towards something, because it's part of the ACT process. But in the long run, I think that people can have an idea of how they can be less biased, you know what I mean? And they can act more that way, right? And if they could do that, would they ever approach being completely unbiased? I don't think it's possible, because I believe the environment controls our behavior. I think it's the opportunities that we're, presented for us in our reinforcement history, our history of reinforcement, and that's what determines behavior. I feel pretty confident in that because I could use ABC data sheets to predict someone's behavior. I could do a functional behavior assessment. We could use the different equations to predict people's behavior. So we know, and in one of our equations we have this parameter B, and we can figure out what B is. I was using it on I was looking at the Eagles, their play calling this year, because there's a lot of comments on their play calling, and they did fire their offensive coordinator, and they're getting a new one. And one of the things I looked at in the middle of the year, I'm teaching this EAB class, and I'm showing the students the matching law, and they're like, "Well, can you like show us a modern application?" Right? And so I showed them the article by Derek Reed from 2005 that looked at the NFL play calling and applied the matching law to NFL play calling, whether the play caller is going to call a run or a pass, right? And I applied it to the Eagles play calling, and I asked a simple question, because the Eagles went to the Super Bowl last year, and I asked, are the Eagles more biased towards the run this year than last year? According to their offensive coordinator, they were, and they'll run it just to run it. But I felt last year they ran it. They were really persistent with the run. I think their strategy was, we're going to run the ball. And we're going to wear down the defensive line. And then in the second half, we'll continue to run it, and then we'll be able to run all over them, which worked really well. Saquon Barkley had like a phenomenal year. He had a record set, almost set the record. If he would have played the whole game, the last game, he would have set it. So it worked really well. And then this year didn't have so much success. And so we did this equation, And lo and behold, that last year they were like more biased towards the run. They stuck with the run even when it didn't work. Even when the reinforcement wasn't there, they still ran the ball. They ran the ball. They ran the ball. And the result of this was having a terrific running game. And then if you look at this year, they did have a different play caller. They lost Kellen Moore to like the Saints. Kellen Moore became a head coach, so they had another play caller, and he didn't call the game the same. You could tell they passed more. I mean, they had more passes than runs, so they're certainly not running it as much as they did before. And the bias was different. And when we did the equation in front of the class, we found that they were less biased towards the run this year than when they were last year. Some of the funny things that kind of occurred, I looked at like the data from 2004. I guess it was the 2003-2004 season. And the Eagles went to and that was in Derek Reed's study. And the Eagles went to the Super Bowl that year too. And when I was messing around with the equation, like I used there's two parameters. There's bias and sensitivity to reinforcement. I was using that sensitivity parameter that they had in 2004, and I ended up with the same bias for last year, which tells me that there is only one variable difference between the play calling from when they went to the Super Bowl in 2003, 2004, and when they went to the Super Bowl last year, which I thought was like really, really interesting. What that variable is, I don't know. It's either the bias or sensitivity, but like there wasn't much difference in their play calling. And I don't know if it's because like that's just the way the Eagles like the Eagles as an organization, they impress this idea on the play caller. This is how we want it called, or if that's just a recipe to win a Super Bowl.
Well,
I remember last time I think this year too, because I followed them pretty closely because I had so many on my fantasy team. The O-line just didn't seem like they performed this year like they did last year.
Different people, yeah.
Yeah, no Kelsey,
They're the
Lane
same
Johnson
people.
was out. Last time we connected, I think, and I'll talk about this because tomorrow, the reason we're doing it today is because tomorrow's NFC Championship. I think we were prophesizing a Cowboys-Eagles NFC Championship game. What happened, gentlemen?
goodness. Well, we split the series, so we're good there.
Oh, do we? Yeah.
I
If you
didn't think
consider that to be a win, I don't know. Like that
well,
was.
I was riding high for just a few games there, right? We, got the Eagles, we
BKC.
got the Chiefs. There was that random stat that came out. I guess the Cowboys are the only team to ever do that in one season, is beat the two preceding Super Bowl teams and then the two preceding champions, which, again, I had to hold on to something, gentlemen. Come on. But yeah, no, I mean, I didn't expect the Cowboys to be in the NFC
I thought this was their
Championship.
year. Going to be.
Well, it's always their year perpetually. It's anybody's year, really, right?
How many?
Even Dan's team, it's their year every year. Right?
How many?
Yeah. So like,
oh God, please.
so when Suzanne sent me the paperwork, is there anything you definitely don't want to talk about? And I put on there the Dallas Cowboys, like just to mess around with Mike. But I got no problem. I got no problem talking about them. But and the last time you had me on, you painted me in a corner. How would you have the Dallas Cowboys win a Super Bowl? And made me say it. And I was like, after we recorded that episode, I just had these thoughts like, I hope they don't contact me and offer me like something like amazing, like, oh, I really want, we really want you to be there, and then you were asking me like if I think a behavior analysis would help them win a Super Bowl. And to be honest with you, I don't think they're doing database decision making on the Dallas Cowboys. I think it's whatever the owner wants to do.
Whoever Jerry
Right?
can pay more to.
Yeah, it's Jerry's world.
Yeah. Man.
And he goes by his gut. He'll just go by this is what I
feeling.
think is right. Yeah, he just goes by the feeling. And we already established that feelings are unreliable.
No, and
So
to that, to that extent, the losing Parsons felt devastating. And then at the end of the day, I don't know. I mean, the defense stunk anyway, and it wasn't like he was. I think people had figured him out. I loved him as a player, and then Jerry makes a decision like that, and I'm devastated. And then at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, I certainly miss him.
oh, you're really upset about that.
I
But
was
they-
at first.
they
It didn't make sense to me, right? And then once we got into a few games, it's like, okay, it's done. You have to accept it. But at the same time, I do, looking back at some of his final games, I think people had figured out the defensive formation. I think people had figured him out pretty well. So
Yeah, you think so?
yeah, I
He
mean, he's a
did
great
have an
player.
impact.
He's a great player. I take nothing away from him, but yeah.
he did have an impact with Green Bay.
Yeah,
But you got a couple draft picks back for him, right? You got like I
yeah.
think then you get a couple of first rounders. I mean that should really help.
It
They
was a
do
good
need to
move.
rebuild. I felt like their offense was actually fine this year.
Oh yeah,
The Cowboys. I thought their offense was
I
good.
enjoyed. I
Um,
enjoyed. Yeah,
Pickens.
yeah. Pickens and I mean, C.D. Lamb's. He's got his few drops per game, but he does some pretty cool things. So I enjoyed watching
mhm.
them. Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
better season than before.
it's like baffling though, and then it's like they had the good offense, and then I don't know. Sometimes I look at the Cowboys and I'm like, why can't they win? Like, what is kind of like they have everything they need, don't they? They have good players,
There's
and
a
they
C.D.
they
Lamb
look good,
syndrome that happens. There's a certainly the secondary stunk. I mean,
You know what it
their
reminds me
pass
of
defense was pretty poor.
is the Cowboys are the NFC version of the Chargers. They always have really good, and
My
we
wife
know the
came.
Chargers because we're in San
Mhm.
Diego. Like they always have really good rosters, and there was one year the Chargers were actually number one in offense and defense and didn't even make the playoffs because their special team sucked. But
Jesus.
they just
Mhm.
remind me of each other. They
Yeah.
just like, and then the next like level below that is the Dolphins and the Falcons. But like the
Well, just the Chargers Cowboys, the idea that you could be up by 20 in the third quarter and it's still not a sure win. Like, well, I guess that can be applied to several teams, but Cowboys Chargers, man, they're just notorious for that. Like, oh, it's a great
Mhm.
game. And my wife's a Chargers fan, and she'll do crazy things like turn away from the TV because she's convinced that if she's watching the game, they do worse. It's like, yeah, but you gotta, honey, but you gotta enjoy the game. You gotta what though? Okay. Don't tell me the score.
Mhm.
Okay, I won't tell you if they're doing well. That's fine.
there's your variable time reinforcement.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
All right.
differential reinforcement, no
Do you,
doubt.
do you think you could so if we're not gonna broach the behavioral strategy to get the Cowboys to win the Super Bowl, could we develop a
Not
design?
again.
No, no, that's fine. Could we develop a design to get Cowboys fans to not think this is gonna be their year? How many years does it have to go with them not winning for them to realize that it's not
Look,
gonna be
I've
their
got
year?
a. I think the better question is, do you get to trash talk if you've got no loyalties to a team? That would be, I think, the bigger ethical question here, Dan. I mean, do you have a ticket to trash talk if really you don't have a team?
Well, I think it allows me to manage my biases so that I can watch the game objectively and unbiased.
I was going to say this earlier. I think that the other side of bias is being partial, and that's what you're lacking, my friend. Anyway,
Just to let you know, we can measure that bias. We can absolutely measure it and see how and we can see if Mike's bias is more than Dan's bias, and you compare it. For the Cowboys, I would expect Mike's bias for the Cowboys to be pretty significant.
strong,
I would
pretty
think.
strong. It's
Yeah,
lifelong.
pretty strong.
It's lifelong. Gentlemen,
Yeah.
we've covered a lot of ground.
Oh
We
yeah.
may have lost a few people here at the end, but we enjoyed it. So that's our freedom to do so. Dr.
Yes.
Scott,
That's great.
sir, anytime you want to come back on, we will certainly approach you again in the near future to come back on. And again, open invitation to use this platform if you see fit and you see useful. It's been an incredibly invigorating conversation. We can't thank you enough
Mm.
for coming back around a second time, for spending almost 3 hours with us. So thank you so much for your time.
Mm.
We wish you luck in all your endeavors. Certainly wish your daughter luck in her cheer competition here next
Thank you.
weekend, and have a great time in Florida. Thank you so much.
Wish you luck with
I
Seba.
appreciate it.
Anything on your end? Any closing points or anything you wanted to say, plug,
I just
whatever?
want to. I just you know, thanks for having me. I feel so lucky to be able to talk about this. It's it's awesome, and be able to talk to you guys because, I do listen and you do have great guests. So guys, please keep it up.
Thank
And
you.
and just to be able to talk about like freedom, something that hey, this is when I was preparing for this, I was like, oh, I got to do my research. And I realized like I had already done it. I've been doing it for a long time because
Yeah,
that was my approach in the community was just like all based on behavior analysis. So I just started going back to that literature, and I had five different PowerPoints and I'm pulling from just to get everything together. But it's I already did the research. It's something
yeah,
I've been doing for a long time, and it's like great to be able to talk about it, especially at such a significant time because the topic is going to come up. We're going to be talking about
oh, it's
freedom.
here.
Freedom is going to be a
Yeah,
big topic, especially towards the summer, and behavior analysts should be in that conversation.
we agree. No, we certainly agree, and thank you for your preparedness. A lot of guests pose that question, and like we say in the intro, or we used to say in the old intro. Oh no, I say it at the end. This is live and unfiltered. We want that, so we certainly appreciate your level of preparedness, and then moreover, what you just said, the idea that you kind of put it together to think about it, and then you came on here and you riffed. You talked about it, in casual conversation that was elevated. You really brought our game up today. We truly appreciate that. These are topics that, conceptually, philosophically, we've seldom, if ever, touched on ABA on Tap. So we can't thank you enough for your preparedness and for elevating our game today and for spending a nice amount of time with us. So unless anybody wants to say anything else, I've got my closing points, and you guys can certainly jump in here. So what I've got is explore the different flavors of determinism, enjoy free will, the free will of your options, and
always analyze responsibly.
cheers, Dr. Scott. Thank you so much.
Yum. Delish. Cheers.
Nice.
Always analyze responsibly.
ABA on Tap is recorded live and unfiltered. We're done for today. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. See you next time.